The Best of Our Knowledge explores topics on learning, education, and research. On today's program, the pandemic changed the way students learn, including the widespread adaptation of remote learning. But how did the pandemic impact online higher education? We'll speak with the president of Excelsior University. And one of the nation's most powerful teachers' unions has a new leader. It's all next on The Best of Our Knowledge. You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm your host, Lucas Willard. Online learning became a necessity during the pandemic when students of all ages traded the classroom for the kitchen table. But distance learning has been a way for decades for adults to complete their degrees or train for new careers. Dr. David Scable is president of Excelsior University, an accredited nonprofit online school based in Albany, New York. Scable came to Excelsior during the pandemic lockdowns of August 2020. We spoke about the challenges the institution faced when all members of the college community were remote, even the staff.
By the time I got there, people were pretty much used to working remotely. But like everybody at that time, there were a lot of challenges. People were trying to juggle multiple spouses working at home at the same time, kids trying to use the computers, bandwidth, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was challenging for our staff, but it was equally challenging for our students because our students are adults. Average age of our student is about 35, and so they lead the lives of 35-year-olds. And so it was a tough time, I think, for everybody.
It's interesting because Excelsior University is it's a distance learning college.
Yep.
But when everybody's online at the same time, you don't think about how that would actually alter how the classes are instructed and how the learners actually receive the material.
Yeah, and all the stuff that we don't typically think of, like bandwidth. And if you have multiple computers going on in the same household, there may not be, and the kids are, trying to learn on school, they're downloading videos or stuff that has a lot of content. It could make the communication very slow.
Because everything was so different, everything was so locked down in the summer of 2020 still, did new students choose to delay their enrollment in Excelsior University than Excelsior College, or was there actually an uptick in student enrollment?
So it's a great question. And what we saw basically in 2020 and 2021 is that enrollments went down across the country. And the main reason, especially among adult students, the main reason was that they became overwhelmed. Right? We've been talking in just a couple of minutes here about everybody working from home, whether it's students or parents. And so you had everybody working from the kitchen table, dogs barking in the background, kids are yelling, et cetera, et cetera. And for a lot of people, something had to give. And you can't get rid of the kids. You can't get rid of the spouse. You need the job. And so a lot of people simply took a break from school. And so what we saw was a significant decline across the country in higher education for adults. And so you saw that especially in the community college systems across the country, there were huge declines. But in adult-facing institutions like Excelsior, we had enrollment declines as well. Not nearly as significant as a lot of other schools, but it impacted us too.
It also comes down to the ability for people to pay tuition as well. If they're not working in times like 2020 and 2021, they have other things on their mind than taking online classes.
Absolutely. It was a tough time. And it was a tough time because it also coincided with what in higher education we've seen coming, which is a significant decrease in the number of college-age students in general. So traditional age schools that serve traditional age students, like most of the SUNY schools, most of the private schools in New York, and so on. The birth rates started to decline in 2008 because of the Great Recession. And so those students who are now 18 to 19 years old aren't there.
Wow.
Yeah, and so what's happened is that there's been much more competition for adult students, right? Because everybody wants to fill classrooms, everybody wants to fill seats. And so the size of the market has been shrinking.
So let's fast forward now to 2023. How did things change? When the lockdowns were lifted, did students start returning?
So this is a really interesting question. In 2023, Excelsior in particular has been doing really well. Our enrollments have rebounded. Our revenues are up. Our program mix is good. We're actually doing very well. At the same time, when we look around the state of New York and around the country, we're seeing a lot of schools really struggling, right? So Casanova closed recently. Medill just announced that it's closing. Paul Smith's is being acquired by a for-profit. This kind of stuff is happening all over. And that's just New York. And so we see this happening all over the country. So what we're seeing now, and again, in higher education circles, we've been talking about this for more than a decade, we're seeing a significant shift in consolidation in the sector, similar to what we saw in healthcare, say 15, 20 years ago, where small institutions are struggling. They do not see a path forward, and they are looking for partnerships with larger institutions or among themselves to create critical mass so they can survive.
Have other colleges and places of higher ed reached out to Excelsior to say, hey, how do we navigate this? You guys have been doing it for 5 decades now.
Yeah, so Excelsior was created in 1971, like you said, but of course at that time there was no distance education in the way we think of it today. The internet didn't exist at that time, and so the purpose of Excelsior was really to help adult students who have some college credit but no degrees finish their degrees. And at that time, it was called the Regents External Degree Program, and it was really an office in the Board of Regents. As the institution evolved, it became Regents College, and then really got into online around 2000 when online became very popular. And it was one of the leaders in online higher education and continues to be. And so we do have schools who reach out to us. Many schools simply don't have the resources to put all their programs online, and so they're looking for partnerships with a school like Excelsior to convert their programs to an online environment.
There was a change in the definition in New York State of what a college is and what a university is, and because of that, many colleges, State University of New York colleges, are now universities, including Excelsior. Has that changed anything for the day-to-day operations of Excelsior University?
Well, this was a really important point for us. When I joined Excelsior, it was Excelsior College. And so I engaged the Board of Regents, engaged some legislators, and really started the conversation to rethink the criteria for university status in the state of New York. And I was very pleased that the regents were willing to change the criteria to allow schools like Excelsior, which would be a university classified as a university in any other state, to be classified as a university in New York. What it allowed us to do is to think more comprehensively about how we can serve students. For example, abroad, college by many students is interpreted as high school. So getting international students into a school in the U.S. that is categorized as a college is very, very difficult, whereas getting international students into a university is much more commonplace. The other thing for us is that we're starting to think of more advanced degrees. We're starting to think of applied doctorates. We're starting to think of pathways for students that lead to terminal degrees. So it's changed our thinking a bit.
Let's break that up a little bit. With international students, how many students does Excelsior University serve right now from other countries? And just noting that a degree from an American university is worth a lot overseas as well.
It is. Now, again, because we only changed from a college to a university a little more than a year ago, our international students are actually primarily expats, U.S. nationals who live abroad, or military students. 40% of Excelsior students are either active or former members of the military, and many live abroad. And one of the things that's so attractive to them about Excelsior is the flexibility. They can study from anywhere. They can be in the field. They can study in any time zone, so it makes it much more attractive. Now, you're right that many international students value higher education, American higher education, and so there's a lot of competition across the world for international students.
And then back to the change from a college to a university status for Excelsior. Excelsior has now been able to expand and add some new programs too. Can you detail what's been able to move forward since that change?
Well, we restructured significantly. So Excelsior College had its internal structure consisted of 3 schools: the School of Undergraduate Studies, the School of Graduate Studies, and the School of Nursing, because nursing is one of our largest academic programs. Since then, we've restructured to a 2-college model. So we have a College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and a College of Nursing and Health Sciences. And within those colleges, we have schools. So in the College of Nursing and Health Sciences, we have a School of Nursing, which again is one of our marquee programs, and a School of Allied Health. And we're looking to build a school of mental health counseling, because we know that in the sphere of healthcare in general and healthcare education, it's impossible to separate mental health from physical health. So it's what this new structure is allowing us to do is really rethink our curriculum, rethink the way that we package learning for students, so that we help students move into jobs in ways that are directly relevant and applicable to the way people live and work today.
Does an online institution have more flexibility and able to meet the demands of the economy, meet the demands of industry in the current moment than, say, a college with a physical campus?
It is for certain kinds of students. It really depends on what the student wants. All right. So if you have a student who just graduated high school and needs basically a finishing school, a school to grow up, live in a dorm, go out with buddies for beers on Friday night, that kind of thing, then residential campuses are the right place for those types of students. But more and more students are in the workplace. They come in and out of college. They come back because they need to get retrained. They need the next degree and so on. And for that, online education is ideal, because most of those folks can't take a break from their lives and live on campus for 2 years while they get a master's degree, right? So schools like Excelsior are extremely important for that type of demographic, and students can study anytime and anywhere, which means that somebody lives in New York, in Albany, and then gets a job in Los Angeles. The person doesn't have to interrupt his or her studies, just continues on once he or she moves.
And going back to earlier in our conversation, we were talking about the effects of COVID and online learning. Graduating students now have plenty of experience in online learning, so it's not as big of a jump from going how they were learning in their high school careers to an online college system.
They do, although we have a tendency to call any distance mode of delivery online learning, and that's a bit of a misnomer. What happened during COVID when schools went to a distance mode of delivery is that faculty simply started to lecture over Zoom, right? So instead of lecturing in a classroom, students were on a screen listening to faculty lecture over Zoom. That's not online learning, at least not good online learning. Well-done online learning is a combination of instructional designers, faculty content experts, media experts who compile a true student learning experience into a course so that students are able to engage in that learning on their own when they need to, and then connect with faculty when it's important and when they need to do that, rather than sitting and listening to a talking head.
So what's the future for online learning look like for you and the future of Excelsior University?
Well, so certainly we're feeling good about this year. And now that the academic year is coming to a close, we know where we're going to end up with enrollments and revenues, and we're feeling good about it. And we have a plan for growth for the foreseeable future. We're going to be developing some new programs, but we're also looking to build the kind of partnerships that I was talking about earlier with other institutions. We know that there are a lot of schools that want to partner, that need to partner, and we want to do that. So whether it's consolidating and merging with another institution, whether it is forming affiliations with other schools, we think that the future for Excelsior is to build what I call a constellation of institutions, which is a grouping of schools that collaborate, maybe share back-end services, share some programs, so that students can take full advantage of all of the opportunities that those schools that are collaborating can offer. So let me give you an example. We, as I said, we have adult students, and many of our students would love to have an intensive in-person experience, but they can't do it for 3 or 4 years. So we can partner with a campus that has a nice physical residential experience, maybe house students there for 2 or 3 weeks, give them a lab experience or an intensive business experience or something like that, and then let the students go and finish the rest of the program online. Maybe do that for them once a year. Maybe partner with a school overseas to allow students for international experiences. So I think nowadays, because students are more used to learning at a distance, providing these hybrid learning opportunities is a really exciting future.
Dr. David Scable is the president of Excelsior University, an accredited nonprofit online university based in Albany, New York. You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. With nearly 700,000 members, New York State United Teachers is the country's third largest teachers union and is considered one of the strongest teachers unions in the nation. In April, NYSUT elected Melinda Person to become its next president. Person has served as NYSUT's executive director and political director. Person is moving into her new role as the education system is still recovering from the lingering effects of COVID-19 on learning and school environments. Person spoke with the Best of Our Knowledge's Ian Pickus.
We're coming out of COVID, which was a really challenging time for our students and for educators. And so we're dealing with a lot of things in our classrooms. We have safety concerns. We have gun violence in our schools more often than we've seen in the past. Pay is always a concern because our members are highly trained master's degree level professionals, and so compensation always matters. But, our members want professional autonomy. There's a lot of things that go into it. But we want these careers. There's not a shortage of people who want to go into helping children and to educating. They want respect, though, in their jobs, respect in their profession, and they want autonomy.
So what changes would you like to see?
So the over-reliance on high-stakes testing has been influencing not only what our members teach, but how they teach. They know that using things like experiential learning or project-based learning, there are other approaches to educating students that are not measured necessarily by a standardized fill-in-the-bubble test. And they want to use the experience and the knowledge that they have about what's best for kids to deliver and produce outcomes for kids.
What is another way of tracking student success if not standardized testing?
Well, students are tested all the time using local assessments. What we're saying is that our educators know best how to assess their own students. They don't need a statewide standardized test that would measure that. They have other means to do it.
With the benefit of some hindsight as we speak in 2023, what kind of impacts do you think the years of COVID education and remote learning have had and continue to have?
I think one of the things we learned from this COVID pandemic period was the real value of human connection and in-person learning. It was, for us, remote learning was a spare tire, as they say, right? It got us where we needed to go and through a period, but there's nothing like that personal connection between a student and an educator. And it can't be replicated online in the same way or with the same level of quality education provided.
So you have a 3-year term. What would success look like for you if we're speaking about 3 years from now?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, first, we will have enacted at the federal level the Jamal Bowman's bill, the More Teaching, Less Testing Act, which will give our state more flexibility with regard to the requirement to do annual testing. We will have grown our membership here at NYSUT, and we will be, thousands of members stronger as a union. We will have rolled back some of the onerous high-stakes accountability measures that have been implemented over the last decade, including returning APPR to local control and rolling back receivership, which is a punitive mechanism for schools that are struggling, and instead replaced it with a process that supports our struggling schools and provides them with the help they need instead of just shaming them. We will have fixed Tier 6 and provided some real tier equity for our newest members who have entered the profession in the last decade so that they can retire with dignity after a 30-year career. We will have succeeded in acquiring a multi-billion-dollar commitment to public higher education here in New York State. We have a campaign, the New Deal for Public Higher Education in New York, which will bring back equity and access to public higher education. And we'll have elected many more NYSUT members to office, because we believe our members can speak from experience about the needs of our communities and our public education system.
Just one more thing about school safety, which you've touched on a couple of times. How do you propose to do it? A lot of districts have decided to hire school resource officers, SROs. There's discussion in some parts of the country, maybe less so in New York, about arming teachers. What do you envision here?
Well, we don't support arming teachers. We believe that the solution lies in focusing on mental health needs of children in our schools and in our communities on a broader sense. We believe that, locally, school districts can decide the level of support they need with regard to SROs. It is a decision that every community can make on their own. But school psychologists, social workers, staffing to support students' needs, that is what we think is the most important thing that can be done.
That's Melinda Person, elected in April as president of the New York State United Teachers Union. Person spoke with the best of our knowledge's Ian Pickus. Earlier this month, the World Health Organization announced the end of the emergency it declared for COVID-19 3 years ago, and the United States ended its federal emergency soon after. With more than 3 years of data on the pandemic, researchers are now diving in and are beginning to find what messages from governments led to changes in behavior and were effective in slowing the spread of COVID-19. One team of researchers found social media had a critical role in decreasing COVID positivity rates at college campuses. As the best of our knowledge's Dave Lucas reports.
The team found that employing social media posts as a means of visual nudging to encourage safe behaviors resulted in decreased COVID-19 positivity rates of up to 25%. Sebastian Sweetie teaches supply chain and analytics at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. He contributed to research led by Anton Ivanov, an assistant professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign.
So those universities that consistently show mass images did better than the universities that didn't show.
Sweetie says the takeaway message is, rather than send a specific rule across email and social media, such as everyone has to wear a mask from now on, it is more effective to transmit an image that depicts people apparently wearing masks because they want to.
You have to be careful and work through time, creating an account, a social media account that is fun to watch, that the people wanted to see, sending positive messages and communicate the different kind of things. Use well your social media accounts. They are powerful tools.
Reporting for the best of our knowledge, I'm Dave Lucas.
This has been The Best of Our Knowledge, episode 1705. The Best of Our Knowledge is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. Thanks to associate producer Jody Cowan, our executive producer is Dr. Alan Chartok. The latest on all National Productions programs is available via the Airwaves newsletter and our flagship station's website, WAMC.org. Until next time, I'm Lucas Willard.